Imagine standing on a jagged, wind-battered rock in the middle of a churning, frozen Atlantic, only to discover that the people meant to be guarding the light have simply ceased to exist. This is the haunting reality of the Eilean Mor mystery, where 3 seasoned keepers vanished into thin air, leaving behind a dinner that was never eaten and a lighthouse that held secrets no one could decipher. On December 15, 1900, the steamer Archdor reported that the light at Eilean Mor, a remote island in the Outer Hebrides of Scotland, was not functioning. The weather was treacherous, a wall of gray mist and violent, crashing waves that prevented any vessel from approaching the island for nearly 2 weeks. When the relief boat Hesperus finally arrived on December 26th, the silence that greeted them was far more terrifying than any storm. Captain James Harvey blew his whistle and fired a rocket to signal their arrival, but there was no response. Usually, the keepers would be waiting on the landing stage with flags and cheers, eager for the sight of fresh faces and news from the mainland. The utter absence of movement was the first red flag, a visceral sense of wrongness that permeated the damp, salty air. Joseph Moore, the relief keeper who had come to take over a shift, was rowed ashore, his heart heavy with an unexplainable apprehension. As he ascended the steep, winding path toward the lighthouse, he found the gate to the landing closed and the door to the light tower itself unlocked. He stepped in the main living quarters, expecting to find his comrades, Thomas Marshall, James Duckett, and Donald MacArthur, but found only a cold, haunting stillness. A chair was overturned, the kitchen table was set for a meal, and a single set of oilskins hung on the hook, leaving one man unprotected against the biting cold. It was as if the keepers had stepped out for a moment, yet the clocks had stopped, and the logbook, a meticulous record of their existence, told a tale of mounting dread. The final entries in the logbook were the most chilling, describing a storm of such ferocity that the men were reportedly praying in terror. But wait, there was no storm recorded by other nearby vessels during the dates these entries were supposedly made. The logbook claimed the men were sobbing, fearful for their lives as the elements tore at the lighthouse. Yet the weather reports from the mainland remained calm. This fundamental contradiction between the log and the reality of the environment suggested that something else had gripped these men. Was it a collective hallucination, a mental breakdown, or perhaps a psychological reaction to the isolation that this desolate rock demanded? Many suggest that the lighthouse was not just a place of work, but a pressure cooker for the human mind, isolating 3 men in a cage of stone and salt spray. The monotony of the duty, combined with the crushing sound of the ocean, could drive anyone to the brink of insanity. Yet, these were veteran men, experienced in the harsh realities of maritime life, not prone to flights of fancy or sudden collapses of character. The layout of the lighthouse further deepened the confusion, as every piece of equipment was found in its proper place, save for the missing oilskins. Evidence of a struggle was non-existent. There were no bloodstains, no signs of forced entry, and no indication that anyone else had ever stepped foot on the island. The interior felt preserved in time, a tomb constructed of granite and glass, where the ghosts of their daily routines remained trapped in the stale air. If they had been swept away by a wave, why would the interior be so orderly? And why would one man have gone out into the freezing wind without his protective gear? The mystery only grew more complex as investigators combed the island, searching for any sign of a body or a footprint. They found that the western side of the island showed signs of significant damage, with iron railings bent and large rocks displaced by the sheer force of the sea. Some theorized that a massive rogue wave, a monster wave as sailors call them, had crashed over the cliffs, dragging the men into the depths. However, this theory fails to explain why the men were not all in their protective gear, or why the logistics of their final moments seemed so disjointed. The disappearance became a focal point of public obsession, sparking intense debate in the newspapers of the day. People whispered of phantom ships, supernatural entities lurking in the sea caves, and even extraterrestrial involvement, as they desperately tried to fill the void of the unknown. The official report, though thorough, offered no definitive answers, concluding only that the men had been lost at sea. But the lack of closure left a festering wound in the maritime community, a story passed down from generation to generation like a dark, cautionary tale. Consider the psychological toll of being stranded on a rock that rises like a jagged tooth from the abyss of the North Atlantic. Isolation is a powerful force. It strips away the layers of civilization and forces the mind to confront its own reflections in the dark. The Eilean Mor keepers were not merely men on a job. They were prisoners of the light, bound by a contract that required total detachment from the world they knew. Was it possible that an internal conflict, a disagreement that spiraled out of control, led to a tragic end that could never be spoken of? We may never know what truly transpired on that island, but the silence of the light remains one of the most enduring mysteries of the 20th century. It serves as a reminder that even in our modern, mapped world, there are pockets of space where reality simply unravels. Whether it was the cruelty of nature or a darker human element, the three men of Eilean Mor remain forever linked to the lighthouse that failed them. They stand as silent sentinels in our collective imagination, a triad of lost souls whose final moments remain obscured by the eternal, shifting fog. Take a moment to consider the weight of their legacy, the way their story continues to pull at the edges of our curiosity. Does the answer lie in the waves, or is it buried in the very foundation of the island they walked upon? Perhaps some secrets are not meant to be uncovered, preserved by the sea to haunt the living forever. What do you think happened to the men of Eilean Mor? Did they fall victim to the sea, or is the explanation far more human and chilling? Drop a comment below with your own theories, and let us keep the conversation going as we navigate the shadows of the unknown.